If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button as well as the bell to be notified of future videos. Thank you.
Hello Internet, we are back. I believe this is episode 8. Once again we have General Bornman with us, and today we're going to speak about something which will excite me, and it's called the staff course. Now, you cannot become a senior officer, I think, unless you pass the staff courses. It's extremely important and it's hard. Sir, can you tell us, but first let me say again, welcome here. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Like always. But can you tell me, sir, you've passed over the staff courses at various levels. Please tell me, where does this come from? Why is it important?
Because there are actually 3 staff courses. I'll emphasize on the Army staff course that we had to go through. It's not in the true sense of the word promotion course, but if you listen to the naming of the various courses, you should see that this is there to promote you and to train you for further promotion and postings. We had the Army staff course, the Navy had their own staff course, the Medical Corps had their own staff course, and so with the Air Force, they had their own staff course. Now, what also happened, there were Air Force members on our staff course, and some of our members were on the Air Force staff course, and that counted as a staff qualification, as well as some of our members in Special Forces went on the Naval staff course, which was a very good thing, because we relied on the Navy for a lot of seaward operations. That is the different arms staff courses. And then you have the joint staff course where everybody gets together. On our staff course, there were people from the correctional services, policemen also have attended, police colonels on the staff course, and it was a very good course. But I'm going to focus on the staff course of the Army in my time. Obviously, since then, with the new dispensation, the staff course situation has changed. I cannot vouch for that, but I'm going to tell you what happened in our situation, in our lifespan. There were 2 staff courses. They called the one the blue and the other one the red staff course, but that was just a name that came to them. The blue staff course was just a staff course and a management course. It was normally for people who are not earmarked for operational postings and units. These were staff officers that went on this course. They got their normal promotion. It was not a demotion course. And they became brigadiers, and here and there somebody could become a general. The course that I'm going to talk about is the red staff course, as we called it. It's the command and staff course. It trains you as a commander at brigade, divisional, and army level. And it also trained you to be a staff officer at brigade, divisional, and at army level. Now, what's the difference between a commander and a staff officer? A commander is somebody who is appointed as an officer commanding of a military unit. In this case, a unit, a battalion, but they train you for a brigade commander and a divisional commander, and then obviously as an army commander. So it is to train you as a commander to be in command of operations and to prepare for operations. The staff work is to train you as a staff officer in the various functions that we have in the Army. Let us start with personnel. Nowadays, they call it human resources. How to manage the human. In other words, how to manage the soldier. in training, promotion, development, and this type of thing. Secondly, you have intelligence staff officers. They are working with the intelligence situation in any war situation. The collection, dissemination, and distribution of intelligence for the commanding officer to do his appreciation and to fight the battle ahead with good intelligence. Then you have the operational staff officer. He prepares the operational situation for the commander, and he controls the operations for the commander. The commander obviously is in charge, but he does the staff work. Can I say the book work, the writing work, and the collection of information regarding operations for the commander. Then you've got, I think the most important one is the logistical staff officer. The guy who's got to make sure that we get food, that we have ammunition, that our vehicles are ready, and all the different spheres in the logistical field. And then also a new thing that came in is the medical staff officer. It's normally a doctor. Also gathering the whole medical situation and advising the commander on medical matters, evacuation of troops, prevention of diseases, and seeing that on the front line there are enough medical personnel to support the fighting soldier up in front. Now the staff course, and it's still in Pretoria, and it's nearly a year long. We work for about 6 months, then you get a period of 10 days leave, and then you tackle the situation again till you finish with your final exercises and so forth. Now, where does a staff course fit in our organization? There was a Professor Kutsia who helped us in the Defense Force preparing you for the staff course. We had the preparing course, the pre-course, before you could go on a staff course. You did a group of exams for 2 weeks, sometimes 3 exams in a day. And then the last exam was a practical exam. We had to do an appreciation at the brigade level and present that plan to the examiners. And then if you pass that pre-course, you could go on the staff course. That pre-course is tough. Many guys go there 2, 3 times before they can pass that. That's also a selection course, if I can say it this, for the staff course. Now you clock in Pretoria, and you've got a rondavel. It's a round room that you stay in for this year. And I'm telling you, it's a lot of work. You start with all the different tables of our war equipment. Those questions that you ask on whether we have the equipment ready for a battalion. You go through all these things and you do various exercises in this that you know it by hand. You also go through the intelligence, the operational situation of the enemy, the envisaged enemy, the orbit of the enemy. You've got to discuss that in detail, how they operate, their tactics, their capabilities, their abilities. You've got to study that in depth. Then in the personnel situation, you also do the policies of the Army regarding personnel, whether operational training or in peacetime. And then you also do the logistical situation. There's various, it's not only, as we call it, socks and jams. It's not only rations and water and supplies of fuel. It's repair and maintenance of vehicles. It's also the logistical situation by air and by train and by land. And you get various exercises. You've got to take this battalion from this point to another point. How many train tracks would you need? And where would you put all your equipment? It's a tricky situation that you've got to go through. I'm telling you, every night when you come back from the whole day in lectures and exercises, you look in your little post office box and there's a task for the night. Appreciation or a task or a problem that you've got to solve. And I'm telling you, before 12 o'clock, you are still working, sometimes through the night. But this is to put pressure on you and to orientate you, because in peacetime, it is all right. But in operational situations, the staff officer works very hard, and he's actually the slave of the troops in front. He's the guy who's got to see that these things are up in front. Okay, once you've done with this, there are also very interesting visits that you do. You visit all the army units to acquaint you with their capabilities. You visit the Navy to acquaint you with their capabilities. You get into a submarine and you submerge and you take a trip under the sea and you get into some of their frigates. You all get seasick. I've got that problem. But it's one of those things. It's not the Navy's fault and it's not the sea's fault. It's my own fault. And I've seen seasoned sailors getting seasick, but that's just off the track. And then obviously to the Air Force, you visit the military hospital, all the functions that they can do and all the functions that the military people can do. And that is you acquaint yourself with that. You also get lecturers from the State Departments, from the Department of Defense, the Secretary of Defense, and so forth. So you're enlightened all the time. And the second part of the staff course is when you start doing appreciations. They give you a situation in South Africa with a set enemy that's infiltrating at some other area, either through Mozambique or through Zimbabwe or Namibia. And then you've got to curb this infiltration. And it's not only just the operational plan, you've got to hand in a plan regarding the personnel, the intelligence. You must first of all do your command appreciation as a commander, then your intelligence appreciation, and then you do your personnel appreciation, your logistical appreciation, and your medical appreciation to support this operation. And you do various of these operations. We get big boards with talc, transparent plastic cover, and you compile all your maps and you draw various lines and red and blue markers on this. And so you sit down and you do your appreciation. On this course, and at the end, I'll tell you about a few stories of the foreign students, the amigos. We had people from Chile, Argentina, Paraguay, Uruguay, and these countries. And later years, it opened up for African countries and all these guys after 94, which is a good thing. They came to this course. On our course, there were even 2 Rhodesians. And in 1980, the one guy said, I've had enough. I'm going back and I'm leaving Rhodesia. The other one went through till the end and he passed the staff course, but he didn't join the South African Army. Okay, then you do all these things. And one night, there was a guy from Paraguay in the syndicate. Now, these 4 Afrikaners had to speak English for the benefit of this guy because they couldn't speak Spanish. He could speak a good English. And the guys were sitting there doing the appreciation and they marked the map and everything. And they said, yeah, well, our aim is to wipe out the enemy. This guy got up with a spirit's cloth and he wiped out all the enemy positions that we got there. The guys were quite confronted, but this was language. He wiped out the enemy. He said, but you said wipe out the enemy. I wipe out the enemy. So it's just a small little joke. We also learned a lot from these guys. Look, it's a different army, a different approach. And the one guy, and by the way, you also get 3 staff papers to write. It's like a description that you've got to hand in. And the first 2, he was allowed to do it in Spanish. Because the one guy, a friend of mine, Theo Bielefeld, did a Spanish staff course, and he could speak and read and write Spanish at a very high level. But he said the 3rd one, you must do in English. And when he got his marks, his wife's name was Carmen Luz, a very educated lady. They stayed there for a year in a military quarters in Tabatswane. And he got his remarks, and the first 2 he failed. It's a different army, it's a different situation, and one of those things. And he passed this one in English. And when he got his results, he got up in the class and said, well done, Carmen Luz, you passed, because his wife helped him writing. I'll never forget that. He was an excellent chap. And the guy just after us, Delboa, Major Delboa, after the staff course, the year after our course in 1981, he went back to Argentina, and the Falklands War started. And his company was captured as POWs. And he said, I'm Major Delboa from Argentina, and last year I did staff course in South Africa. And they, not a problem with that, please, but this was the way we, what happened to the guys afterwards. And really, we became friends with these guys, these foreign guys. Okay, then we had a history. I've talked about the history period, and this Commandant Bacchus that I mentioned, that was on that course of mine in the operational area, he was the conductor of that, being a professor and a doctor in history. Then you studied the history. Luckily, in my syndicate, I got a task on the Anglo-Boer War, and we did very well because it's one of my pet subjects. But some had to write about Patton and the sea warfare, the Japanese, Pearl Harbor, and these things. Very interesting, and he helped us with that. To answer or to re-answer your question, that senior officers should know their history. That is very important. And then the final exercise was an exercise in Mpumalanga, enemy coming from through Mozambique, and they gave the strengths of the enemy and all these things. Now you had to know what's their tactics, how far they can travel in a day, what type of weapons they've got. You've been trained in that, and that then we examined in that situation. And after the course, you all have a nice meal, and the officer commanding of the army, General Gelnys, came. He handed you a certificate, and you were allowed to wear on your shoulder a lanyard, a red lanyard, saying to the world, this man has passed the staff course. Now, the same Professor Kutsia, who helped us with the pre-course or the selection course prior to the staff course, they once asked him, what's the academical equivalent of the staff course? And remember, he's a professor at Potchefstroom University, and he was also a major in the artillery. So he knew the military, and he knew the academical world. And he said he'll come back the next day. He came back and he said, yes, I can't tell you that you can write MA, master's degree after your name, but I'm telling you the volume work that you do here is the equivalent of 3 master's degrees. That made me proud that we could say that that was the situation in South Africa where they allowed a group of 30 guys for a whole year to be on a course and to qualify them as staff officers and as commanders. And in general, of course, the Defence Force had a very, very, very great esteem for training, and they trained us well. Our training was functional, it was good, and it gave you an open mind in the international world. It really opened your mind, and I think they trained very good soldiers. That is in short. I don't want to bore the guys with all the exercises that we did and all these things. Yeah, we were also naughty. Some nights we were free, we went to town, have a meal, and so on, and a few drinks, and came back and we started working again. But in general, it's a long time to be away from home and to be absolutely occupied just with work. But as all things, it comes to an end and you get out a much better person than you went in. Please, any questions from your side?
Yeah, I'm bursting with questions, sir, like always. It's such a privilege to speak to you. Thank you once again. Were there any psychological tests done on the candidates before we would go on this pre-selection?
Yes, yes, more in the aptitude line. You had to do certain tests, but it's not. I don't want to say it wasn't very intensive because at that stage, you know, we were in the Defence Force nearly 20 years already. They knew what they had. It wasn't and the selection course selected the guys who didn't want to work from the guys who wanted to work. And there they could see. They could see this. And look, they appointed you. You couldn't apply for this course. So they knew at that stage. Yes, we did. But the shrieks, that part didn't play a role.
On an average, how much sleep would you get per night?
Well, from 2 o'clock perhaps till 5 o'clock, and then just finishing off. And that could carry on for a week, but it was very well paced. This couldn't go on for 3 weeks in a row. We worked on Saturdays. Many Saturdays you had a task. You could do it over the weekend, finish it on Saturday, and Sunday you got off, or you could come in on Sunday and do it. It was really the pace was human, because humans can pass it. That's the main thing.
I've heard a story somewhere, I might be wrong, but one of the senior officers, I don't know if it's General Viljoen perhaps, reintroduced the stress factor of a staff course, in the sense the lack of sleep, the pressure of the tasks to be done all the time. And another officer, perhaps before him, relaxed it a bit. Or do I have it the other way around?
No, it was so all the way. The basis of our staff courses after the Second World War came from Britain. I think they laid a foundation on this, and that was that all the way. There was, of course, there was no easy staff course. There was no happy-go-lucky staff course. What they did in the evening, say for instance, before 12, you had to hand in. There's they called it a directing staff box. It looked like a post box. And at 12 o'clock, the duty officer of the Army College had to put in a leave, a blank paper, and all the papers that landed up after that, they came in late and they were penalized. But we had a drill. When we finished, and it's nearly say 12 o'clock was the deadline, we go there and we talk to this little guy there in the ops room. And, no, sir, I'm just going. No, just wait, man. Just, what's your name? Where do you come from? And we waste the time till the last guy's in, and then he can go put it in. It's not trickery, but we used to do that. We never exceeded a half an hour or more, because then it's criminal. Then it's really criminal. But you learn to take long steps. You learn to take long steps. No, I had one situation. When there's a task at hand, you sit down and you do it. You don't go and eat first and go this and do this and wait till then. When you get out of the work, we normally used to play volleyball or basketball. Go and play your sport, shower, immediately start working. And then you find you're fresh and you're ready. But if you procrastinate and wait till later and later, that's when you run into problems. And when you sit, you work. You don't play. You work. That's one thing that I learned on that course, and that helped me as an operational staff officer and as a commander. It really helped me a lot.
I recall reading something in Colin Powell, and this was just after the first Iraqi war, first Gulf War, which we actually won. Well, I don't know how we could have lost, quite frankly. But he then wrote a book, and I read the book. And in it, he said there that when he went to Vietnam as a younger soldier, for the second time, for his second tour of duty, he was already qualified as a staff officer. And when his commanding general found out about that, he pulled him out of the field and immediately put him in a staff position. Now, my question to you, sir, is it possible then for a good staff officer to also be a good combat commander?
Oh, yes. It's one of the steps of a divisional or a brigade commander, is to be a staff officer in some other way. Oh, most definitely. Oh, because you support your commander. You've got to give him the support in your field that you have. Look, in a brigade or division, you have a chief of staff who's in charge of all these staff officers. So either you're the chief of staff, or in our line, being in the infantry, you'll be an ops, or you even could be an intelligence staff officer. No, the staff officer it's a very good stepping stone to a command position.
Now, I'm fascinated because I have to ask you, how realistic is the evaluations? And let me explain. I went to university at quite a late stage in my life. In the sense, I was first 6 years in the police, and then I left the police and I went to university for another 5 years, plus articles. It's a long road. And I had a friend with me there, also came from the police, and he's a good fellow, but he's a bit narrow-minded. And so he was doing criminal law. And of course, in the early 90s, universities were quite liberal all of a sudden, even in the Free State. And they would always give you this story, and then you have to give legal advice on it. Now, they were quite smart people, these professors, and you don't realize it as a law student. You only realize it later that there's always an answer. You can always get the guy off from their stories, from their scenarios. So they train you to find a way out. You don't realize that as a student. It's only much later when you find a guy who's actually guilty, and you sit there and you think to yourself, man, there is only one way out. You plead guilty and you You say you're sorry. And it comes as a shock on your system. And one of the questions I asked this friend of mine, they had a scenario that this fellow got himself captured by the security police. He was taken to a certain police station. And then the next morning, his body was found. We all know where they were heading to. This is typical liberal university thinking. And he said as follows, I know that police station. I've been there. You obviously were not there. At that 8th story or wherever, there is no big windows. There are no such things. This guy could not have jumped down. So this is nonsense. This is rubbish. And that was his answer. And he got 0. And he was quite upset. He actually left the university because of it. So my question to you, sir, with the usual long explanation is, how realistic would have it been if I say to you there's going to be a armored attack, I suppose, from Mozambique down to Durban, and then how realistic were these plans for you to solve, to counter?
Of course, they were very realistic. For one reason, it was based on the tactics of the enemy, which was a doctrine actually that we followed. It was based on them with their capabilities and, of course, the equipment that they had. And another factor, of course, is terrain and the infrastructure in South Africa to be used. But really, we never found, especially on staff course, that the narrative that they gave us was a airy-fairy thing, and it was not realistic. I want to tell you, all these narratives were very realistic. And actual things that could happen in South Africa. That's why we didn't go to a so-so land and a red force and a blue force and this type of scenario. It was based on actual probabilities and possibilities. And remember, through the years, and we were in 1980, and there were, from the Second World War staff courses, all the funny scenarios were casted out. And it was done by clever people, guys who were chosen to become a directing staff on the staff course. No, I can vouch for that our scenarios were not airy-fairy or a pipe dream or a possibility, and just to get you to work out something or to test you and trial you. These were real, actual things. And if today, say there's an attack out of Mozambique, you can go and get those solutions of the staff courses. You can just dust them off, and that will help you a lot. Obviously, the situation would have been changed. No, that was actually on the ground. And what the directing staff did, they went on the ground. They studied the ground, the terrain thoroughly, walked it, rode it, flew over it. And they knew the situation. No, luckily we never had that problem. And I'm being very honest with you here.
Because I also recall General Colin Powell in that same book. He said he did one of the advanced courses. And he's a clever man. I mean, let's say no doubt, that guy is sharp. He's got a high IQ. And so he said he knew the answer. He knew what they wanted to hear. He knew they wanted him to say in these exercises, in his answer, to release his armor and do something with his armor. But he felt in his heart it's not the right decision, even if that's what they want to hear, because he didn't have enough intelligence. He said he had to wait a little bit, and this is in an exercise now. And he explains how he was thinking about it, and then he didn't go for what they wanted. He went for his own way, and he came second. And he says he came second because of that. And you could see he was still a bit annoyed by it. So my question, sir, is, could you figure out what they wanted? Or were you able to do your own thing?
No, you had initiative. You had the scope. And they were always open for new ideas. For instance, but this was not on staff course, it was on the uh, battle team course. The scenario was that the enemy was in a position and we were in a position. And what are you going to do? And the one guy came out and he said, please, there's a lot of grass. We're going to set the field on fire. And the wind is blowing in that direction, and that will hamper them, and we'll bombard them with artillery and all these things. And the guy said, well, it's not the textbook solution, but it might work. Now, flexibility was most definitely there. And you must remember, the guys on that course were staff officers. They commanded units already. At least they were company commanders in the bush corps. And they came from the battle school. And they had experience. It was not a lot of novices. But the directing staff was also picked, handpicked. Clever guys with experience and knowledge and being, up to scratch with all the knowledge that you need to do this type of thing. No, we didn't have. Here and there were problems. I remember with my battle group commanders, it was a matter of a day and a night attack, and you had to be at another position in a certain area. And I said, I'm going to wait till daytime because the night attack is a very difficult thing. At nighttime, I'll bombard this position, that position, and I'll do attack. And the solution was to do a night attack. They wanted to test you on a night attack. And I passed that they deducted the situation because they wanted to test us on night attacks. And I said, but I can still be at that stage there, but I want to get less casualties with the situation. And they gave me the due. I remember they got all the staff together there and said, listen, this is what this guy said. But they said, yeah, well, it's logic. He'll be there on time. No, we had scope and they were not very rigid. But the main thing of these exercises was to bring out lessons and to teach you to apply theory to practical and to do your staff work and to do your command appreciation on the intelligence that was given to you. That was the aim of the exercise. But they were flexible. I really have a great esteem for the directing staff of the Staff College. Really, they were good guys.
I know that during the Second World War, they were training submarine commanders, talking Royal Navy now. And it was like a room. They would be in a room below, and on top of them, the story on top of them would be like a convoy or ships or something. And there were no computers in those days. We were actually little things, little models. And then they had an entire periscope, a thing which goes up and down. And the prospective commanders here below in the other room would look through this thing, gives the bearings, whatever the naval people do. And some of the female ranks, I think they called them, the women's auxiliary, they became so good at this that they could actually take over as a submarine commander in an attack phase by just listening for years how these guys were running the different scenarios. My question, sir, is this. If I can take one of these professors when I make him a battle group commander, is that good or bad? Might he not be a bit too arrogant, perhaps, because he's done it so many times on paper?
Which professors are you referring
to? The professors at the instructors at the staff course. If I can take one of them and I make him a battle group commander.
No, they'll do the job. Some of them became divisional brigade and commanders at that level. Oh yes. In the operational area, our senior staff operation officer, SSO Ops, Wouter Lombard, I'm going to mention his name. He was on the directing staff of the college, and he did very well as staff officer operations. No, they can. Remember, they've got background. He was an armored guy, and he's got the knowledge. No, he can be. There are exceptions, but most of them, especially armor, infantry, artillery, those guys at any time can step in and command the fighting unit. No, they could do that.
This means to me, of course, that the staff officer must really know his weapons. That of himself as well as for enemy. He has to know how these things operate. Range, armor, thickness, what can destroy them.
Range, capability, logistical support, and all these things. It's the whole tutti you can do.
Now, with these plans which you work out, I mean, the one coming from Mozambique down south is obviously defensive. So would you also do it in offensive?
Oh yes, no, there are offensive tasks. In other words, to jump the gun, to go into for yes. There are many. I just use that as an example. There are many of them that you've got to attack into neighboring countries, like Botswana was one, and Namibia, was another one. That the enemy came down south and they're sitting there and they want to invade the Northern Cape, and you have to do an operation stopping them coming in. No, we did offensive operations many times. Not only defensive operations, then retro operations as well, where you've got to retreat back and this type of thing, to regroup, to invade another way. Yes. You know, interesting thing in humor, the Batman there at the Army College that clean your room and make up your bed, when you start with the first exercises, they normally came there and they said, no, you must take the left approach. You mustn't go right. You must take the previous guys went left and they did well. Obviously, you went and you did your appreciation, but they remember they became part of the staff and of the student squad there. And then jokingly asking them, what did they do there? Yeah, no, they. But it was more in jest than anything else.
There is something called a preemptive strike, sir, and it's allowed under international law.
Oh, yes.
And it seems to me that NATO these days have only one idea how to do a battle. And that is they create some kind of diplomatic reason to be there. And then they start stockpiling their troops and armor and whatever on the borders of this place. And then at some stage, they will attack it. And normally that will be done by stealth, or what they think are stealth. With the aircraft, they'll take out the anti-aircraft batteries, and they will then bomb the hell out of it for a long time. And then their armor will go in with full air support. And then they conquer this country, and then their trouble in life starts. That's the scenario. Now I'm asking you, sir, theoretically, it's just a theory, it's nothing more than a theory. It's like an exercise. I want to stress this. Let's say that the enemy country or any enemy starts building up on the shores of South Africa. And they start building up. What are the chances of a South African army attacking first in a preemptive strike?
Oh, yes. Well, that justified our whole being in Angola. It justified our operations in Mozambique. It justified our operations to support the Rhodesians. It justified our operations in Botswana. We must differentiate between a counterinsurgency type of operation and a pure conventional operation. A preemptive strike, the prerequisites for a preemptive strike is you go in, you neutralize that area, and you carry on till a certain line or a certain stage where you can take over. And then everything must come in. Repair of infrastructure, logistical support, and even management of towns and this type of thing. And we had that scenario in the Angolan situation. And in our exercises at the Army College, all these things were included. The civilian part as well, It's just as important as the military part. But the main aim of a preemptive strike is to make it permanent. Not like in the Iraqi situation. They went in, the artillery and armor went in, the infantry, and then there was a stalemate situation. You must go in and you must conquer. Can I use the word conquer? That whole area. And you must prevent the enemy of regrouping and coming back again. Otherwise, he's going to just regroup and come back again. You sit with the same situation. No, our scenarios, and especially at the Staff College, we learned that once you've occupied a town, water, power, and these things has got to be restored. Then you have the local population on your side, and fixing of infrastructure, the runways, the roads, the railways, this type of thing. Normal life can carry on, but you must carry on can I say a preemptive strike is the best form of defense? Rather, and that was our whole strategy in Namibia. Fight them in Angola. Otherwise, we sit with the border at just north of Upington. And then we have the hinterland as a problem. Luckily, in the Namibian situation, they once a year came through to the Tsumeb area and Grootfontein area. But this was just incursions, small little incursions, which we neutralized maximum 3 weeks. Then that was over. It justified our whole disposition in Angola.
Yes, and it's allowed by law. Once again, if the countries host enemies of another country, then he's not neutral anymore. And if he's not neutral, then he can be attacked. By law, that's the way it is. And sometimes now I have to ask you, yes, should such a preemptive strike be launched? What would such a battle group look like?
At least a brigade plus. In other words, a battalion of infantry or mechanized infantry, rather, depending on the terrain, whether it's mechanized or paratroopers, but at least a battalion, at least a regiment of artillery, and at least a regiment of armor consisting of armored cars and tanks, depending on what's on the objective at the other side. So that is a brigade. A division is when you come in with brigades. You've got 3 brigades, and you've got a very strong armor element and a very strong artillery element. Of course, with all these support elements. But in the Angolan situation, our biggest one was at least a brigade strength. We've never deployed a division. That's those 4,000 men that they're talking. That's a division. And we could deploy them. But a brigade was enough. A brigade settlement.
But such a brigade is traveling at high speed. So how do you supply this thing?
The easiest way is by air, but you can't always, if there's not a favorable air situation, you can't supply them. And luckily, the armor has got his own supply echelons, so has the mechanized infantry. But you have replenishment on the road. And this is where the logistical tail behind the echelons must come in. And they must be ready with the supply. And it's normally fuel and ammunition and rations. And then, of course, medical supplies. And replenishment of weaponry that's US, that's broken or that's gone or that's been damaged in attacks. You've got to resupply with weaponry as well. There's certain lines that you have, first, second, and third lines that you have to supply this. But the logistical guys play the most important role. But as I said, the easiest is the Air Force. You just ask for them to drop a few drums and then you carry on. But that's a low scale story.
How much freedom of movement will that commander have?
All the scope that he needs within the perimeters of the task that he's got on hand.
Yeah, so it's not like Hitler, who started executing his generals just for, because if you discover one base and now you overrun it and then there's another one 5 miles down the road, surely you can jump further.
No, precisely. No, he's got the scope to do that. Flexibility is absolutely there. And obviously, he's got radio communications to his higher commander. Should he deem to ask for, or just inform the commander, listen, I'm going 5 kilometers away from me is another group of guys. They're posing a threat to their armor and their artillery. Then most definitely he can carry on.
Would you consider, sir, to be, once you've attacked and you've launched your attack and it's fairly successful and now you have to withdraw, how dangerous is that phase to break contact and move back?
The retro is very dangerous because remember now the enemy's got time to regroup. He can bombard you with artillery, and remember in Africa, immediately a conventional attack can become an unconventional attack, guerrilla tactics overnight. You can send in small groups to attack your withdrawing columns and this type of thing. Yeah. And that's why when we do retro operations, it's always in a leapfrog from one point and the other guy goes back to the situation. But and the essence is intelligence. Your intelligence must be able to tell you what capabilities the enemy has. And then you still mark these targets artillery-wise and Air Force-wise. And then you withdraw, leapfrogging, going back, not to be surprised again.
So it seems to me that the secret of a South African success was that they didn't occupy. They would strike hard, achieve the objectives and get out, because they could always come back.
And remember, they had the Cubans with them, they had Russian, Bulgarian, East German advisors, and they had the Fabla forces and the Cubans. They had them there. They could regroup, and, they could attack you, but achieve your objective and leapfrog back step by step with good intelligence and be ready with your artillery. And this force immediately must be able to turn around to go in again, should there be a threat to that. But we went in, got the objective, did the thing, and we came back. Also for international purposes. We didn't want to be blamed for occupying Angola and taking Angola over, or Mozambique, or whatever the case might be.
Well, it doesn't work. We've seen that in Iraq and Afghanistan now. You cannot go and occupy a country. I mean, all what will happen is you will have constant losses. These people will react at some stage and you will have a steady drain of blood. It doesn't work. And
they won't attack you frontally, but they'll attack you in unconventional ways.
Yes, you will have terrorism.
Afghanistan is a textbook example of this. The Russians paid a price, and now the Allied forces that went in there also paid a very dear price.
Yeah, it seems to me, sir, that some generals just don't know history.
That's right.
Or perhaps they were under the influence of the politicians. What can you do? We get back to the previous episode. These people give you stupid orders, you protest, and then what do? But that reminds me, sir, how far can you protest an order as a commander?
First of all, you must have a good reason. And this is where the planning phase comes in. You can't sit there as a brigade or a unit, a battle team commander, and just get an order to do something. You're part of the planning in the beginning, because you've got to do the execution. That's one way of looking at it. Impromptu targets could jump up while you on the advance, and the higher command could tell you, listen, don't worry about that one, go for this one, because he sits with a bigger intelligence picture. But coming back to your question, yeah, it happened. It happened that certain things were said in armchair capabilities, and people just went on. But we never really had serious problems with this, because the operational commander was part of the planning, the initial planning. And then I think our higher commanders, if the commander in the battlefield tells him, listen, I've got this problem, we cannot do this, we can do this, can't we do that? They were always reasonable. I really don't know of any serious problems that the generals had to be shot, a la Hitler situation. He was very rigid, and if he said do this and you don't do it, whether you've got the equipment and the capability or not, he didn't mind. He just shot the general, and that was part of his downfall. No flexibility here, and remember one thing: the higher commander sits with a bigger intelligence picture, and this is what the commander on the ground will realize.
How far down the line would you brief the soldiers under your command that they can understand what you want to do?
Right down to the lowest level. Obviously, not all the detail and these things. What they need to know, they must know. But remember that guy on the ground, that rifleman number 4 in that platoon, he's got to do the execution. He must know why he's doing it. He must know with what he's doing it, and he must know what support he's getting. That's important. You can't just say, okay, we carry on and I'll tell you later what to do. That doesn't work. They must know. That's why you've got a chain of command. The battalion commander speaks to the company commanders. The company commander speaks to the platoon commanders, and he informs his troop down to the last rifleman. And they must know. They must know the objective, what support they've got, and what's our restrictions, and what can we do, what we can't do. So that is important. That's why they call it the chain of command. It's not a matter of just barking and running to a place.
Is there anything, sir, I didn't ask you about the staff course which you would like to tell us?
Of course, there are many things that in a year, many things can happen. I'll just tell you one little incident. I told you I was one for getting down and doing the job in tasks that we get. We once got a logistical appreciation to do for a bigot pack that we did. This is now a paper exercise. And we got together, it was 2 of us in the syndicate. And I said to this guy, old Melt van Niekerk, I said, Melt, we're going to take long steps tonight. We're going to sit and we're going to work. I'm sitting in front of the board and writing. You stand, you do the part of the appreciation, I'll do the other part. We switch, and we're going to do this thing. We're going to run for this. And Melt's wife was in Pretoria, and at about 9 o'clock he left. We were finished, and I think we did a hell of a good job. And what the directing staff did, they also clever, and remember they also did the staff course. They know the story. Normally 9, 10 o'clock, they pay us a visit. And then they see which guys are still working, who's finishing, and if there's any problems, they can discuss it with him. And I said to old Melt, I'll just do a few aids for the situation for tomorrow, if we present. Obviously, everybody can't present the problem. I'll do that. You go home, and I carried on in my room. And he went to Van Niekerk's Rondawel, nobody there. Came to me, he said, what are you doing? I said, no, we finished. I'm just doing a few aids tomorrow for the training. And next morning at breakfast, I said to Van Niekerk, the old man came here last night, and I'm sure we're going to present. Prepare yourself. We got into the lecture hall. He said, okay, Bornman Van Niekerk, will you please present? Because he thought we cuffed this whole thing and we were finished early and all that. And Van Niekerk started speaking. I plotted all the areas, all these assembly points, and where they put redundant stuff and the scrapyard of broken vehicles, and all these points were there and everything. It was my turn to speak. I did it, and he plotted everything. When we were finished with our presentation, the old man said, yes, I'm surprised. I thought you guys were finished early. And thank you. This is excellent. It was good. We didn't cuff the whole situation. Cuff mean, you just have a lot of bull there and you talk a lot of nonsense. And there were some citizen force guys being trained as staff officers in logistics. They were very impressed with this, with the situation. Senior guys that later became high up in the civilian hierarchy. And no, the lesson I learned there is get down to the work. And if I can give a tip to staff students, go and sit down, do the work and get finished and get a good night's sleep, if it's possible. And use initiative. That was a very formative year in my career. I enjoyed it. It was difficult. We had difficult times. And sometimes there's strain, and some tasks you do individually, sometimes you do it in a syndicate. And in the syndicate, there's always one or two guys who make the coffee and who pours the drinks afterwards. They didn't contribute. That's life. That's life. And it was interesting. And the friends you make on the staff course are friends forever. And later in your career, you meet them, and there's just that bond that most definitely is there. None of them have passed on. I mean, we getting older, and I was a major at that stage on the staff course, and normally the guys on the staff course are lieutenant colonels. But it was really great to be on that staff course and to form that cohesion. And we didn't see the directing staff as enemy. They were the tutors, and they tried to educate and to help us, and it was always positive. We had a very good officer commanding there, and he really helped us. It's a difficult day, the last day. Then you all individually go into the officer commanding's office, and he tells you, listen, you made it or you didn't make it. But normally along the line, some people fell off, and then they could go onto the command and management staff course. So they were not ousted out of the defense, but they were out. And you knew they would have told you to pack your bags and go. And then they tell you what you did. They read your report for you, say congratulations. That's quite a relief. That's quite a relief. It's a very good year that I don't want to repeat in my life.
Well, it's only the best. It's the best young officers who go on that. And it's only the best to survive it.
That's true. It's also part of the selection. Let me tell you, it's part of the selection.
Well, thank you, sir. I must tell you, I found this episode fascinating. To me, planning the operations is actually the greatest thing there is. But that's me, I might have that type of personality. So to all of you who's been listening here, thank you again very much. Thank you for your thumbs ups and your comments. If you have any for the general, you're welcome to leave it here. If it's possible, we will answer you. And until we meet again, God bless.
Thank you, Chris. Bless you.